Right now, everything you're seeing and hearing is running through this video switcher right here, which is the Ulanzi DD02. And I would like to show the O2 to you today because this is a very, very interesting switcher, maybe one of the most interesting, especially budget ones for a lot of reasons. Hi, I'm the Ulanzi DD02 video switcher, and I was sent to Tom at no cost, but he's under no obligation to make a video or do anything or even say anything about this switcher. He just decided to because he thinks it's pretty interesting and he likes it. It's not 100% perfect. I guess are any of us really 100% perfect? I ask you, but anyway, if you want to know more about how Tom handles any kind of partnerships or quote unquote free products, you can check out himynameistom.com/ethics for all of that info. And there's also a video which I'll link up into one of these corners over here. Wow, thank you, Lonzi, the Ulanzi switcher, for helping me with that disclaimer. Okay, we can get into actually talking about this right now. Much like audio interfaces, these have kind of become a bit of an obsession for me, and they vary in a whole bunch of different ways, and it all started with the Blackmagic ATEM Mini, which is just a fantastic switcher and can do so much. And I know I've said this before, but that was at a time where multi-input video switchers, like the cheapest ones you get were a couple $1,000s, and having something like this for $300 was absolutely unreal. But in the years since the ATEM Mini has been released, lots of other different options have come out, and this is just a selection of the ones I have, not even all of them. So the thing that's super interesting here, as I've kind of mentioned before, is you have switchers, things that just kind of change between inputs, and then you have production suites, things that do a whole lot more. So things like the Rodecaster Video, this can switch between inputs, but it can also basically do everything else. It can do scenes, it can do graphics, it can do crazy good audio processing, and it has an MSRP of $1,200. The YOLObox Ultra, very similar, not quite as robust on the audio processing side of things, but it's also a little more robust on the graphics and the scene creation. You can do sports overlays, you can do comments on screen during streams, all that kind of stuff. You can even multi-stream with the YOLObox Ultra, which is cool. And there's even an interview mode, so you can bring in guests directly. But of course that comes at a price, with this having an MSRP of like upwards of $1,600. So those are, you know, the production suites. The switchers, which you just plug in different video inputs and then switch between them like I'm doing right now, and maybe they have a bit of audio processing, these tend to be a lot more affordable. The basic Blackmagic ATEM Mini is $300, and then there's different versions of the ATEM that go up all the way to $1,200 if you want something like this, which is the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. It's not so mini anymore, but this has 8 HDMI inputs, and the ISO thing means you can plug in a hard drive, record individual tracks for all of the inputs, and then they'll also automatically output a DaVinci Resolve project file. So this gets quite a bit more robust, and this was $1,200, whereas the basic ATEM Mini, $300 for one that is essentially just a switcher. And then you've got this one, which I recently did a video on, the FeelWorld L4, which is also just a basic switcher, but it has this beautiful giant 10-inch built-in display. So right now you might notice I have this little display plugged in here so I can see what's coming off the Ulanzi. That is not something that I need to do with the FeelWorld L4 because it's just built right in here, which is super convenient. And once you use this, it's very hard to go back to not having a built-in display. So this has an MSRP of $540. It's a little more expensive. These two are really where I think, in fact, we can focus on them a little bit more, where I think things get pretty interesting because they are the same price. The basic ATEM Mini, which is actually now the ATEM Mini Pro, is $300. And then the Ulanzi DD02 also has an MSRP of $300. So they're the same price. The ATEM obviously has been around longer, has more name recognition. But what I think is really cool about comparing these is the ATEM came out really geared towards people in the Blackmagic ecosystem. ATEMs have all these buttons. For the most part, you're not going to use most of these unless you're really deep in the Blackmagic ecosystem. Like all of these are only if you're using Blackmagic cameras. This is if you're using the audio. The audio on this is terrible, so I kind of don't recommend using that. And then over here you have basically some transition, keying, and picture-in-picture functions, which may or may not be useful, but pretty much every switcher has these, and those are good things to have. And then you have your actual switching buttons down here. Now the ATEM does also have Blackmagic's production control software, which is really cool and like super robust. So if you really want to go in the software side of things, the ATEM Mini gives you a ton of options, whereas the DD02 gives you 0 options. There's no software with this. This is just a hardware switcher. But what they've done here is they've essentially looked at the ATEM Mini and gone, okay, let's get rid of all the stuff most people aren't using, and let's put in stuff that people are going to use, or are at least more likely to use. It's sort of the opposite of the other ones. Things like the ATEM and the Rodecaster Video and all those, they're kind of geared towards professional settings, live event production, corporate projects, you know, big sort of, not pro-level studio productions necessarily, but bigger, more professional settings, and then they can be commandeered and utilized for, you know, content creators and solo creators and stuff like that. The DD02 is kind of the opposite, where it is really geared specifically towards independent solo, you know, consumer level streamers. And that is really what makes the Ulanzi stand out, the fact that it is kind of the first one of these switchers that I've seen geared specifically towards, you know, independent creators. But it also has a couple killer features that I haven't seen in anything else that might make up for any shortcomings, especially when you consider the price and everything it can do for the price. So as I said at the start of this video, you are seeing and hearing everything running through the DD02. It is going over into my M1 Mac Mini through Ecamm Live over there, so I'm recording into Ecamm Live. I'm not adjusting any of the colors, so everything you're seeing is just straight from my cameras. One thing I can say, which you may or may not notice depending on like how many videos of mine you've watched, this shouldn't look quite as like bright, slightly overexposed and oversaturated as my normal videos do, because that is something I do on purpose when I edit in Final Cut Pro. This is just straight out of the camera. But something I've noticed is that straight through the Ulanzi, there's a lot more contrast, and the image is a little bit darker than normal. If you do go watch my Feel World L4 video, that seems like it's a lot less processed, that image. It just sort of went straight into Ecamm, looking exactly like the camera's output. This, and I can even see on my other displays, this looks a lot more contrasty and just sort of darker, I guess, overall. Now I can fix a lot of that in Ecamm, so I just adjusted some of the picture settings, and this looks a lot more like maybe what one of my normal edited videos would look like, just straight through Ecamm. And this is what it looks like on the main camera. But if I go over here and I click reset, now this is how it looks straight out of the Ulanzi. So just kind of something to be aware of, how it handles colors, how it processes colors right there. In addition to video, it can also do audio, and this is where there's sort of like a surprise. So you probably noticed this. This is the receiver for my Hollyland Lark wireless system, and that's what I'm using right here because I want to use something simple, something super compact, and since I'm moving around and looking between different cameras, I wanted to make sure the mic was pinned to me because a boom mic wouldn't work great in that situation for today specifically. But this is just running into one of the 2 mic inputs on the back of the DD02, and that is this one right here. You do have these physical knobs for both of them. And one thing I have to say about audio when it comes to the Ulanzi, which is very surprising to me, is that I think it has the best audio handling capabilities besides the Rodecaster Video. The Rodecaster Video has dual XLR inputs and basically has a Rodecaster Duo built inside of it with all the effects, all the processing, all the preamps, all the headphone amps. Nothing else in the video switching world really comes close to how this handles audio. Makes sense, Rode is an audio company before anything, right? So it makes sense this would have good audio. But this is $1,200, so it's really funny to me that the next best one is the Ulanzi at $300, because ATEM audio is notoriously terrible. The YOLO box is decent and does let you bring in some USB options, which is helpful, but it's not ideal. It's still not the highest quality audio. The Feel World L4 is kind of really bad when it comes to audio processing. And so the Rodecaster Video is really the way to go. And this one is surprisingly usable. I can just actually run the audio straight into the mic input here. I don't even have to, I could bring in audio through HDMI just like you would expect on a switcher, but it sounds just fine. And actually what's kind of crazy, if you notice this mic input, the gain is right about 12 o'clock and this big gain dial here is right about 11 o'clock. And I'm getting a loud enough signal into Ecamm, and I actually had to take the Lark, which has 3 volume settings, and I actually had to put on the lowest one because the signal was like clipping and getting maxed out because there's just that much gain in here. I don't know what the actual gain level in here of the preamps is, but it's enough to actually run at least a 3.5 millimeter system or a receiver or a microphone put in there which is awesome. So normally what I do with switchers like this that aren't the Rodecaster video is I run them and the audio separately, the video and the audio separately. I connect the switcher to a computer through USB, and then I connect usually my Rodecaster to a computer through USB, and then mix those together using Ecamm. You can also do that with OBS, and then it looks good and sounds good. But this does have enough decent quality to just run everything through here like I'm doing now, which is pretty darn awesome. And having these big physical controls is very, very cool to be able to adjust your output level, you know, on screen. I know it looks like the lights are flashing here. They are not flashing to my eyes in real life. Now, there are no audio meters. So even on my screen here, when I have multi-view turned on, there's no audio meter. So I can't actually check my levels. I had to use Ecamm over there and do some test recordings to see that. So that's a little bit, it's a little bit frustrating not to be able to check my levels that way. And then also there is a headphone output, which is actually usable. I have my headphones here and I'm actually able to listen and hear what the audio sounds like. Sometimes, especially with the ATEM and the field world, like the headphone amp is so bad and so quiet that you can kind of just tell that there is audio coming out, but you can't really hear it. But this is actually good enough to monitor with your headphones if you want to, which I really, really appreciate, especially because you don't have any sort of broadcast meters or anything like that. Now, when it does come to video, like I mentioned, you have really 5 inputs, and that's pretty cool. So I have sort of a variety of things happening. This is my Sony FX3. Even though this is a 1080 only switcher, as pretty much all of these are, it can take up to 4K 30. So this is a 4K 30 input, then being translated into a 1080 output. This camera over here is my Sony a7S III, also running at 4K 30. This camera up here is my Sony a7 IV running at 1080 30. And then this camera over here is my Sony projector Handycam. Talked about this. I also use this in the field world. I want to use the same cameras for this comparison as well. This is 1080 30. This camcorder, I did a whole video on this. It's awesome. This is from 2013. Has a projector built in the LCD screen. It's just a little HD Handycam. But for being a 12-year-old camera at this point, like, it's not going to look like the a7S III with a prime lens, a full frame mirrorless camera, but it doesn't look terrible. I can't get a clean HDMI out though, so you still have the focus thing. I don't know, I can't get clean HDMI out on this thing. I'm sure it might be possible, but anyway, just to sort of see that the Ulanzi can sort of take whatever you throw at it, and that would also include things like consoles or computers, basically any HDMI source that you want to throw at this, it's going to be able to adjust and mix together. Obviously, you do want to match frame rates and stuff as much as possible, and trying to also match white balance between cameras as much as possible so things look pretty decent. But there is, if you notice here, there is also a number 5, and this is something really cool, especially for streaming, is it does have HDMI pass-through, which can be a source. So on the back here, you kind of see, let me try to show this. You've got my power supply. You can also have USB power delivery if you don't want to use a DC input. You have 2 3.5mm mic inputs. You have your 4 regular HDMI inputs. This is HDMI output, which is going to my monitor over here. And then you have the USB to go to the computer. You have another USB, which I'll talk about in a second. And then you have your loop. So you have input, this is input number 5, and then output. And what that is HDMI pass-through. And the reason you would really want that is especially if you do anything involving any kind of games or streaming or something where you want 0 latency. So if you are doing a gaming stream, you can connect your console to input number 5. It'll go through the Ulanzi, go out to your stream, but then you can take that other output and connect that to a display, and that's going to display with 0 latency, 0 lag. You know, like right now in Ecamm Live, I can see there's not a ton of latency, maybe like a couple milliseconds. But if you're playing a game where every millisecond matters, you can't really do that. Or in other situations where you need 0 latency, having that pass through is super cool. That's something that a lot of Elgato capture cards have. That's something that the Rode Streamer X has. It's something that's not terribly uncommon in switchers and things, but to have it thrown in additionally on this relatively budget switcher, I think is actually pretty cool. And then I did mention there was something back here which is pretty nifty, and that is probably the most show-stopping feature of the DD02, which I'll talk about right now, because as you've been listening to me, I am wearing this microphone right here, but I don't know if you can hear this. My biggest complaint about this switcher, the thing I am not a fan of, is the fan noise. This is the loudest fan, and it just happens as soon as the switcher turns on. It's not like it turns on when it gets hot or anything. As soon as you plug it in, boom, fan turns on. There is also no actual power switch. There's a power button here, and when I press this, it will turn everything off, but not off. Like, it will just shut down the buttons, but like the fan is still running and this still seems active, so it doesn't actually shut down anything. It doesn't do what you would expect a power switch to do. I do really like that things like the Rodecaster just have a power button. Things like the FeelWorld L4 just have a power button on the side. The ATEM does not have a power button. The YOLO Box does have a power button. This does not have a real power button, even though it has a power button. It's kind of a strange thing, but you have this fan noise. I am using this microphone, which I can push this button here. So if we hear the fan noise, I can turn on noise cancellation, and that should actually get rid of it, which is kind of cool. It works pretty well on this, but that also then negatively affects my audio quality. I know that the quality of my voice now and the quality of the audio is not as good as it would be without noise cancellation, right? Yes, I have noise cancellation turned on. I want to turn that off. So what that means is if this switcher is anywhere near you, I guess kind of depending on your microphone, it's pretty likely to pick up some fan noise. And that I think is a problem since it is geared, or at least marketed as being a consumer switcher. It's not something that's going to be on a table in the back of the room while a team switches it and then the person on screen is nowhere near it. It really is marketed as something that you're going to be here, you know, streaming, doing something, and you have your switcher here while you're doing it, kind of as like a solo creator doing a little bit of everything. And now you're going to pick up that fan noise. But if you've ever used a switcher like this, you also know that these cables are kind of, look at all these cables that are in here. And some of these are also big cables, and sometimes they can easily pull the thing around. So here's what I think is the absolute coolest feature of the DD02. Something I can do is just take this off right here. So now this doesn't do anything, but the switcher's still running. Everything is still going through this part here. I just can't actually switch anything. You can pop that back here. It will very quickly reconnect, and now I can do all my switching. But it comes with a long USB-C cable. I can actually connect this to this thing here that says C to C, and then you will see. Plug that there, and now what I can do is take this off, and now I just have the top panel, which doesn't have a fan or anything in it, and I can still switch, I can switch everything over there. That's just what the switcher looks like now. Here I am, the camcorder over here. I've got everything I need right here, basically. I have all the controls, just the whole top panel right here, including the headphone output. They put it right here, and it even has little feet, so when you set it down, it's angled in a nice way. So this is one of the coolest features I've seen in any video switcher ever, and it serves a very practical purpose because, as you can see, once you have all this stuff plugged in, this becomes a mess. And when this is trying to go across your desk, I mean, you see how many cables are here and things get pulled and stuff. The bottom of the base does also have these mounting points here. So you could put this on a wall, you could put this behind a desk, under a desk, something like that. Basically what it means is you can get this out of the way. You just put this somewhere else entirely, and then you have just the top panel with one cable, and that's all you need to actually do your switching, which is very, very streamlined. And I think that right there is just hugely practical. Like, it'd be awesome if every switcher could do that. I also think with that crazy loud fan noise, that's probably Ulanzi's solution to the fan noise, because I don't think that's the best solution to the super loud fan, but instead of having this on the desk, I can just put that on the floor over there, and now the fan noise should not be picking up on my microphone at all, and my desk is significantly less cluttered because I just have this with one cable here. That's actually pretty sweet. So there is a solution to the fan noise problem, which is just take the part with the fan in it and just put it somewhere else. And then you have this. Again, I wish that wasn't the only way to get rid of the fan noise. I wish maybe you could turn the fan on or off, or it didn't have to come on all the time or whatever. But at least there is a solution, which does have the benefit of then cleaning up your entire setup. So I'm gonna leave that over there, probably for the remainder of this video, just so that way you don't have to hear any fan noise here. And then we can talk about all the other features of the DD02, most of which I covered because it is a pretty simple switcher. It's just 4 inputs, and there you go. But if you notice, there are some other things On the screen here, you do have cut and auto. So right now I have this set to cut, which basically means as soon as I press one of these buttons, that's the input it's going to switch to, and I don't have to do anything else. This is not how like a professional broadcast would be set up. They always have preview program setups, but for independent content creators who are, you know, talking to an audience, maybe live streaming, trying to pay attention to whatever you're communicating and pay attention to the technical side of things, sometimes being able to just push one button, especially out of the corner of your eye, and just, I know that push the button and I go right to that input is really, really helpful and probably the way that you want to do it. However, if you want to do that preview program mode, there is kind of a way to do it. I can press auto, and now when I press another input, it doesn't automatically switch there. Now I can use this fader to go between them, and now I can switch between them that way. Normally when you have a fader or a T-bar like this, what you can do is you do this to fade between, and then you do this to fade back. This one is sort of weird because this will cut to the other one, and then you have to bring it all the way down. Going from top to bottom won't do anything, only going from bottom to top will. So just like ska music, it only works on the upstroke there. So that means, you know, if I had input number 2 selected, I would switch to that by sliding this up. And if I wanted to go back to input 3, instead of sliding it down, I would have to slide it down and then back up, which is very strange. There is also, despite the fact the button says auto, it will not automatically switch like it would on something like an ATEM Mini, for example. This is set up a little more practically where if I'm in that preview program mode, I can press cut and it will cut between them. If I press auto, then it will automatically do the transition that I have selected there. This, it sort of only seems to have that cross dissolve option. Oops, there we go, cross dissolve. We're gonna cross dissolve, there we go, because I had to put the thing back at the bottom. I can put my face over that face and hi. I am the Ulanzi switcher now. Anyway, so you can do stuff like that. But that is just, to me, not as practical of a preview program mode, and I don't know what you should realistically expect in terms of firmware updates with the DD02. I don't think it's going to be anything quite like a Rodecaster video or a YOLO box. YOLO box gets updates like every 5 hours, it seems like sometimes, and the Rodecasters had a bunch of good firmware updates. The ATEM Minis have decent records of firmware updates. I really wouldn't expect much from this. I think kind of what it is what it is. So go in expecting that. Now you do have some other things here. Every input does have on or off, and audio follows video. The on-off basically means the audio. Are you turning the audio on, or are you not using the audio from that HDMI source? Which is a very simple thing to do. And then audio follows video would basically just mean if audio is on and that audio follow video is on, when you cut to that source, it's going to cut to the audio from that source. Now we don't need that because I'm using my audio from here. I don't need any of that audio. There is a mute button. If I press this, it will just mute all the audio, which is very, very nice. There is also this button here, which is a play pause, and that's a freeze frame. So you could do like a nice breakfast club, like, yeah. And now I can unfreeze it there. I don't know. It's nice that I don't know why you would really need that, but it's kind of, I guess it's kind of fun. And then you have these 3 buttons here. These are for your monitor output. So let me see if I can show you. Since it does not have a built-in screen, I have this little display here. This is just a little very inexpensive, I think this is like a $60 display I found on Amazon, but it gets the job done. For stuff like this, it didn't really come with a good stand, so I had to 3D print these stands. You have these different view output options, 1, 2, and 3. Number 1 is what I have right here, and this is program output. You can also see the amount of latency there, which you wouldn't have if you were running through pass-through. Number 2, I don't have anything on there. This is just the preview mode, but since I'm not in preview mode, there we go. Now I switched into auto, and then there, now I have program preview happening. And then the last option is multi-view output, where I can see all 5 of my inputs. I don't have anything in input 5 currently. This is a very basic multi-view output. It's incredibly helpful that you have it, but there, like I said, there's nothing else. There's no audio meters, there's no network connections, there's no histograms, there's no frame rate information, there's nothing. It's just camera 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is it. Incredibly basic. And that really is, you know, what this switcher is. It's a very basic, very simple switcher, which is why I say it's not really designed for those more pro environments. It's more of a consumer-based switcher. Now the last thing that you have are some picture-in-picture settings, which can be really helpful. So you can basically turn this on, and then when you have your main source selected, you just hold down the other one that you want to be your picture-in-picture. So I hold that down, hello, and now I'm over here, and I can just easily decide which corner I want that to be in. Unfortunately, you can't change this. You can't change the size of the picture-in-picture or anything other than one of the four corners is where it goes. But at least it's a really simple way to do it. I could switch easily just by holding down. I can switch my camera angle here. Could I do the same source? I can't put a source in a source. I could put my camcorder as picture-in-picture there. So that works out quite well, and I can just turn this off if I want it off. So, you know, we could go here, and now my picture-in-picture could be the Ulanzi down here, which is kind of cool. So you could see how I'm switching it there. Everything's nicely in sync and nicely matching up, which is pretty cool. So I actually like having that picture-in-picture option, and you can reset it if I want to just take everything off or turn it off altogether. It's a cool option. It's probably something, if you really want to dive super deep into picture-in-picture graphic scenes, overlays, it's probably something that you want to, you know, use Ecamm Live for to make it a little prettier, use OBS for to make it a little prettier. But if this is your only capture card and you have your multiple sources coming into it and you have no other way of doing a picture-in-picture with any other source, because this is capturing all of your media, then at least this has you covered and you can do some picture-in-picture. So that pretty much covers all of my thoughts about the Ulanzi DD02. There's really only one thing that I'm not a fan of, and that is the fan noise. That's my biggest critique. It's just so loud. I feel like that could become a problem for some people in certain situations. Fortunately, there's a way to circumvent that, which I am a fan of this feature. You just put the loud part somewhere else and take the top panel here. Kind of wish you didn't have to do that to get past the fan noise though. Otherwise, you end up with this really sweet switcher that has a lot of pretty cool features and surprisingly good and robust audio processing, which is not something I would expect. Everything else that, you know, that I might feel like criticizing or complaining about that feels a little bare bones or a little like, man, they could just sort of maybe make this a little more robust. I don't think that's what this is intended to be. This is relatively inexpensive. It does things very, very well. It's just a super simple, super affordable hardware video switcher that has some surprisingly nifty features at that price point. And speaking of things that are surprisingly nifty, thank you to everyone who helps support my channel through YouTube channel memberships. And if you want to know more about video switchers, check out my review on the FeelWorld L4. And if you want to take things up to the more advanced level, you can check out my video review on the Rodecaster Video. My video on the Rodecaster Video. It's the Rodecaster Video.